Well, everyone, let's get started. Welcome to Connections Conference 2022. My name is Camilla. I am the Children's Behavioral Health Advocate, as well as the Empowerment and Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Individual and Family Affairs. We also have our fearless leader, Laura, here, who's going to be a part of this presentation. And we have Isha as well, who's the DDD CRS advocate. And I'm going to pass this on over to Lydia, and she's going to take it from here. Thank you so much, everybody.
Great. Thanks so much, Cami. Good morning, everyone. Lydia Lesperance, Employment Administrator here with Mercy Care. I have the privilege of kicking off this session, Show Me the Evidence, Services that Support Your Wellness Journey. We're really excited about it. And I want to take a minute here to introduce our speakers. Our featured presenters today, Jose Rojas is an Employment Rehabilitation Manager with Mercy Care. He has over 30 years of experience in the social services field. He's a proponent of employment and psychosocial rehabilitation services. He recognizes the impact of those services on members finding their passion, what matters to the individual. Noemi Zaragoza is the Senior Act Manager with Mercy Care. She has over 17 years of experience in the behavioral health field. She has had the privilege of working directly with members and their families in different roles and capacities. She's earned a master's degree of administration with a health sciences emphasis from NAU. Matthew Kelly is the lead housing liaison with the Mercy Care Housing Department. He's advocated for better housing outcomes and housing opportunities for members in Maricopa County behavioral health community for over 14 years. He hopes to continue working to bridge the gap between housing and the behavioral health communities. And Laura Pointkowski. She is the Director of the Office of Individual and Family Affairs with Mercy Care and has been with Mercy Care for almost 6 years. She believes in member and family member voice and choice. She hopes to promote a supportive community free of stigma through educating and empowering the community. And she recognizes that mental well-being is just as important as physical wellness. So welcome to all our featured presenters this morning. Let me start off by talking a little bit about evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practices are services that have consistently demonstrated their effectiveness in helping people with mental illness achieve their desired goals. Their effectiveness was established by various researchers in diverse areas who conducted rigorous studies and obtained similar results. And what that means is many areas in the United States and beyond, researchers have implemented particular and intentional practices and have yielded the same results. Despite geographic changes, population changes, if you utilize services and provide services following fidelity to the model, outcomes will be achieved. And that's what we mean by evidence-based practice. Let's keep going. Why evidence-based practices? Well, according to the New Freedom Commission on Mental Health, if these effective treatments were more efficiently delivered through our mental health service system, millions of Americans would be more successful in school, at work, and in their communities. And that was by Michael Hogan, who's the chairman of the New Freedom Commission. And let's keep going. And you wonder, why are we talking about evidence-based practices? Well, I'll tell you how we got here. In 1981, there was a class action lawsuit, Arnold v. Sarn, alleging that the Arizona Department of Health Services and Maricopa County were not providing comprehensive community mental health system as required by statute. So in 2014, there was an agreement was reached to provide certain community services, which included increased capacity in evidence-based practices and ongoing evaluation of these services to move to terminate the litigation. The services, evidence-based practices, included supported employment, permanent supportive housing, assertive community treatment, and peer family services. And to find out more, there's a link here to the Access website. And it is my pleasure to turn this presentation over to Jose Rojas, who will discuss supported employment. Take it away, Jose.
Thanks so much, Lydia. Good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. My name's Jose Rojas. I'm an employment rehab manager with Mercy Care, And today I'm going to just give a brief overview of supported employment. So as you know, it's one of the evidence-based practices Lydia was discussing earlier. And the thing about supported employment that you should know, it helps people who've been diagnosed with a mental illness find and keep competitive employment that's meaningful to them. So when we talk about competitive employment, it's any job that any one of us can apply for that's going to pay at least the minimum wage. So when we're talking Arizona, just keep in mind the minimum wage currently in Arizona is $12.80. So the job exists in the open labor market. We pay the minimum wage and it's integrated in the community. It's not in a workshop setting where everyone's dealing with the same thing. It is a community-based work. And just really quickly, we have 7 supported employment providers contracted through Mercy Care. They're Beacon Group, Copa Health, Focus Employment, LifeWell Behavioral Wellness, Wren, Valley Life, and Wedco. So a couple of things you should know about supported employment. On a yearly basis, we have a team that comes out funded through Access called the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Learning. And the acronym, we call them WICHE. That's the acronym. And every year they come out and they rate of our supported employment providers' fidelity to the model. And what I mean by that is how well they're doing with the model. And basically, they rate them on their ability to follow these core principles. Eligibility is based on member choice. So that basically means zero exclusion. So if you say you're interested in employment, that's all you have to say to get a referral to supported employment. The services are integrated with your clinical teams. So our SE providers are communicating with the clinical team. So for example, if Jane Doe is dealing with some housing issues, the clinical team's going to be aware of that so they could support Jane Doe around her clinical and housing issues while the employment providers focusing on helping Jane obtain competitive employment. We all know competitive employment is any job that we can get that's paying minimum wage and integrated in the community. And they're also going to do some benefits counseling. They're going to get you on a great website called DB101 and show you how getting a job and getting paid, whatever it is you're going to get paid, is going to affect your benefits. And that's an ongoing thing that they will do. And then the job search starts immediately. So typically within the first 30 days that you get started with a supported employment provider, they're going to get you out in front of an employer. And for everybody, that's going to look different. For some, it can be to interview an employer just to find out what the day-to-day is like. For others, it could be job fairs. For others, it could even be interviews. But you're going to get out in front of employers within the first 30 days. And then follow-along supports are continuous. The cool thing about supported employment is you can stay open as long as you need the service. And that means after you get a job, if you want to check in on a monthly basis, you want to work on getting accommodations, career growth, promotion, all of those things they can support you on. And last, but definitely not least, there is no supported employment provider that has a drawer full of jobs. Every job search is based on member preference. So every job search is different. So I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot. Back in 2014, we started implementing supported employment. And back then, the employment rate was at about 40%. So we took a quick snapshot of December of last year. Our employment rate is at 55%. And if you look at when we first started in 2014, we had about 485 members engaged in the service. Back in December, when we took another snapshot, we've more than doubled that. And just so you know, the national average for folks in the similar types of services, their employment rate's about 42 to 43%. So we are doing very, very well in Maricopa County. So what I want to do now is I've talked about supported employment enough. So we have a great video that we're going to share that we're going to have members who receive the service talk about how it's affected their lives.
When I first started my job search, I had no preferences. My supported employment specialist helped me by getting to know me and my personality, what would fit as far as jobs. In working with the supported employment specialist, it was easier. She made me comfortable in my own skin. I got support in building my resume and continue to get support in updating it. They were willing to go to job interviews with me, help me fill out applications, help me prep for interviews, help me with clothing if needed, whatever I needed, they were there for me.
She has also met with me at least once a week, and we talk about stuff. It doesn't actually have to be about the job, but just something that's going on. It really made me feel confident and like I could do anything.
Working with a job developer or a job coach, you get the sense of you get the help that you need at that time. They kind of counseled me saying, we will make sure that this is going to be a good fit. They didn't rush you. The job fairs, they're so big, and there's a lot of different people that go to these job fairs, and they're very overwhelming because there's a lot of companies that are looking for work, and I would get a little bit panicked, so I would find my job coach, and she would reconstruct me, hey, okay, you went out, you did this, you conquered your fear.
Well, I injured my back and I had surgery, and I wasn't able to do physical work, so I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to get a job that wasn't physical, and I was having a lot of anxiety about it. I was getting depressed, and I called my voc rehab person, and she introduced my employment specialist, and she helped me overcome those obstacles.
When I first started with the employment specialist and actually started putting out my resumes and putting out fillers for different jobs, I did not think that I was going to have additional services afterwards. It was actually a complete shock that I would have somebody supporting me and actually calling me every week to find out how I'm doing, and if I need extra assistance, she would meet with me in person, which is really helpful, so I can sit down with her and explain to her in a one-on-one setting, this is what's going on, how do I deal with it?
I was very hesitant, very tentative, and very unsure for many reasons. I was in my late 50s. I had been out of the workforce. I'm an SMI. Any number of factors that brought insecurity and questioning. Through the process, you develop the sense of what your skills and abilities are, and the subtleties and the nuances that become saleable skills. The continued nature of supportive employment is so valuable, because when you do have those moments of fear or terror or panic or lack of self-confidence or assurity, supported employment and your employment specialist is there to work with me and work me through it.
Oh my gosh, it's changed my life so well. I love how it's happened. I got what I wanted. I went out there and met with several different companies and employers looking for, reliable people to work. It's been awesome.
Supportive employment has given me the courage. It has also given me the insight, and it has also given me encouragement on what I need to go ahead and do towards getting a job.
Working has changed my life in the fact that I don't have as much time to think about what could be, what should be, just the demons in my own head. I'm able to concentrate and be productive in other areas of my life.
It's changed me profoundly. I have a sense of professionalism and accomplishment and belonging and being valued and appreciated, which was something quite new for me. I said to my specialist, my employment specialist, if I get this job, it will be tantamount to winning the lottery. And it is. It's absolutely, it's both a challenge and a refuge. It's everything I had hoped for.
I would definitely recommend supportive employment. 2 reasons. 1, they're there for you. And number 2, they help you deal with the emotional part of the job and also getting into the workforce itself.
Just if they're not happy with their situation, nothing's going to change if they don't change it. Employment can help you change that. They give themselves 100% and devote themselves to what they do.
When you're ready to work, and if you're trying to take that next step, yeah, this is a very good start. It's okay to be nervous, so that's normal. Just do what you feel like is right. When you're ready, and if you think you're ready, go ahead and take that next shot.
I think they need to just get out of their comfort zone and give it a shot, give it a try, and they'll be surprised what the employment specialists can do for them.
It is one of the most profound experiences you will have in your lifetime. It will not always be easy. It will not always be comfortable. There may very well be failures. Not every avenue will pan out, but you will have the time of your life.
When I was trying to find a job before the services, I couldn't find one because everybody looked at this thing right here, right off the bat, my disabled arm and leg. They just basically judge you before they even get to see if you can do the job. My voc rehab worker and my job coach, they basically worked hand in hand to help me find employment. I was sitting on my tail, doing nothing, just scooping around on my computer all day, collecting a disability check every month. And not enough to afford, we'd have to buy meals ahead of time, a whole month in advance. And it'd be hard because we have a small freezer. Now with me working, we're buying meals 2 weeks in advance only. And we're actually able to afford stuff like going out for her birthday last year, going out for my birthday this year. We're actually able to afford to do more and then not just sit at home, but we can go like see a movie or something. Once you start working, the anxiety just drops off. I mean, it's just normal. You get back into the pace, you get back to the excitement of doing your job and making everybody happy, and you just see smiling people at you all the time. One thing I like to add is never be afraid to go back to work, even if you're disabled, because disability is just a limit that you put on yourself. You need to push yourself beyond the limits and break them, because I do that every day and I'm never going to stop.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And now we're going to hear about assertive community treatment from Noemi.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Noemi Zaragoza, and I'm the Senior Act Manager here at Mercy Care. And thanks for joining us today. So what is ACT? ACT is a member-centered, recovery-oriented mental health delivery model utilizing an interdisciplinary team treatment approach designed to provide comprehensive community-based psychiatric treatment, rehabilitation, and support to persons with SMI. I would like to just say that the things to take from what is ACT. ACT is, and as you can see in those little circles, but what ACT is, why ACT is so important is that it is member-centered, it is recovery-oriented, it is delivered in a team approach, and it's community-based. ACT is not a brokered out type of service. It's a service that is within house. So that team approach is very important. So who does ACT assist? So individuals with an SMI designation, those with severe functional impairments, individuals who have avoided or been unresponsive to traditional outpatient mental health care, and those with coexisting situations. So may that be homelessness or substance use or involvement with the judicial system. So ACT, the services are tailored. They are tailored to address the preferences and self-identified goals of each member. Services and goals are tailored to meet the needs of individuals and not the team. So the team approach is there for the team to support the member as a team with all their knowledge and specialty, but the goal is the member's goal. The approach with each member emphasizes relationship building and active involvement in assisting individuals with severe and persistent mental illness to successfully identify and make their desired improvements in functioning, to better manage symptoms, to achieve individual goals, and to maintain optimism. And all of this, once again, is done out in the community for the most part. So what are the core services for ACT? So here we have the 5 core services that differentiate ACT from a traditional case management type of model. Psychiatric services, counseling, psychotherapy, housing supports, rehabilitation and employment services. So there are vocational specialists on the team, and then substance use treatment. There are substance use specialists on the team as well. So what does a typical team look like? So each team, teams do have a max capacity, so no more than 100 members per team. And each team is comprised of a full-time doctor, 2 nurses, 2 substance use specialists, an ACT specialist, the 1 clinical coordinator, so the team lead, an employment specialist, and a rehabilitation specialist who comprise the vocational staff on the team, a housing specialist, 1 independent living specialist, a peer support, and then a program assistant who supports the team with administrative tasks. So if you're wondering, is ACT appropriate for me? One thing with ACT is that it does have explicit admission criteria. So it is important to ensure that we follow the explicit admission criteria to keep the fidelity of the practice. So there is a screening process to ensure that the level of care is appropriate at that time. And then ACT is voluntary. So there is absolutely voice and choice. Members do have a right to say no to ACT. You have a right to say no to ACT now, and then maybe later you change your mind and you want to say yes, and that's absolutely fine, but it is a voluntary treatment. And then next slide. So how to access ACT. So for referrals, if you're thinking, this might sound something that may be helpful for me or for somebody that I know, for regular outpatient referrals, so that would be supportive level of care to ACT or ACT to ACT. Those are all managed by the teams themselves. So you would go to your clinical team and request that they provide assistance with a referral for a screening. And then referrals that come from Mercy Care are hospital referrals, new referrals, so for members who are new SMI and pre-SMI, and then forensic ACT referrals. Those are all managed by Mercy Care and sent out through us. And then what does ACT look like here in Maricopa County for us? So we have 24 ACT teams here in Maricopa County. Those 24 ACT teams are divided within 7 different providers. And I just noticed that we have the 17 PCP partnership teams. We actually have 20, but that includes our forensic ACT teams, which are included under our specialty teams, but they are also PCP partnership teams. We do have 1 medical ACT team. And then, as I mentioned before, there is the max capacity of 100 members. We typically do run between 95 to 97% capacity. Right now, we're a little bit under that with close to 94% capacity, but we're typically serving over 2,000 members within our system. I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2017 Medicaid Innovation Award, where the FACT teams here in Maricopa County, the CBI FACT teams, were presented this award. How we know that these evidence-based practice works, this award is a prime sign of that. So the teams, in being innovative and working with our criminal justice partners, have been able to reduce arrest and homelessness and improve behavioral and physical health care. And so in 2017, the FACT teams were recognized with the Medicaid Innovation Award. So that was quite exciting for us and for all of the ACT teams and the FACT teams, of course. And with that, thanks again for being here, and I will send it off to Matt Kelly with housing.
Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Matthew Kelly with Mercy Care's housing team. Thanks for joining us today. The first thing we're going to go through is just a quick video because it's a nice way to quickly summarize what permanent supportive housing services are.
Principle number 1, immediate access to housing with no housing readiness conditions. Participants meet with the support team once per week, but housing is not dependent on psychiatric treatment, abstinence, or other readiness conditions. And when we say no housing readiness conditions, we mean none. Now, many participants stay housed in their first rental, but evictions happen. With the support team's help, it's an opportunity for learning, adjusting, and the immediate chance to try again. Research shows Housing First reduces emergency room visits, hospitalization, shelter use, detox services, and incarceration. There are no common indicators that predict who Housing First will and won't work for. So given its effectiveness, let's focus on Housing First, then let participants tell us the next step.
So really, that's just kind of a quick highlight of what Housing First is on a high level. But ultimately speaking, I think it's really important to note that permanent supportive housing is considered to be decent, safe, and affordable housing where tenants or members are provided the rights of tenancy and flexible and voluntary supports with services that are designed to meet their needs. So really, this is about making sure that there's housing available in the community for individuals, but then also more importantly, ensuring that there's supports available for individuals while they're in that housing. With permanent supportive housing, as the other evidence-based practices, we all know that we have a third-party auditor named Witchy who comes in annually and reviews all of our programs. The different dimensions that they're reviewing each of our programs under are considered choice, separation of housing and services, decent, safe, and affordable, community integration and rights of tenancy, access to housing and privacy, and flexible and voluntary recovery focused services. So just real quickly, choice is just making sure that not only are you getting the individual housing of your choice, but also in the neighborhood of your choice, and more importantly, you're living with who you want to live with. And then separation of housing and services. It's really important to understand that who manages your lease and who manages your services not have any specific connection. Services are there to really support you. Your landlord might have some other goals and intentions, and making sure that those two things are kept separate for individuals. And then of course, decent, safe, and affordable. All of our housing is actually evaluated to ensure that it meets certain safety standards through what's called the housing quality inspection. And then community integration and rights of tenancy. Again, this is making sure that we're finding housing in the community of your choice, not this apartment complex works with, this population, but it's actually finding housing within the community that meets your needs. So it's pretty scattered throughout the overall community. And then access to housing and privacy. Really, this means that nobody else has access to your house. You're the one who has keys. If you decide to give keys out to a friend or somebody, then that's great. But obviously, your service provider doesn't necessarily have direct access to your home. And then last and not least is the flexible and voluntary recovery focused services, making sure that services are available to every single individual in the community and making sure that those services are actually tailored to your needs. So these are some of the basic services that are offered, and you can read through all of them, but I think what's really important to acknowledge is with permanent supportive housing services, the services are going to be focused on what is it that is needed to assist you in maintaining your housing in the community, whether that be assistance with finding the bus to make sure that you can get to and from your job or to and from your clinic, or making sure that you can get to the pharmacy, or assisting with budgeting, or helping you find some stuff to fill up your apartment because you need some furniture or things like that. It could be any number of these different things to assist you, but ultimately speaking, the goal of our services is to ensure that your housing is maintained. Now, we've also talked about the evidence with regards to this. So NORC, which actually stands for the National Opinion Research Center, which is out of the University of Chicago, evaluated our permanent supportive housing programs by looking at a bunch of claims and outcomes data. I believe it was back in 2017, 2018. And at that point in time, we were able to demonstrate a reduction in the overall total cost of care, meaning people were using services less because they were actually in stable housing. Behavioral costs had gone down similarly. And then also psychiatric hospitalizations had decreased. So in other words, you're seeing these are all indications that an individual is increasing in their stability because they have stable housing. And last but not least, how to access PSH subsidies and services. So housing subsidies through the Scattered Site and Community Housing Program are currently now being accessed through the Access Housing Program. Some of you may know that ABC Home Inc. is currently the administrator of the Access Housing Program as of 10/1 of 2021. You should, if you're interested in this or think that you qualify or have a need for housing, please reach out to your case manager. Your case manager will definitely assist you in submitting an application to the AHP and making sure that you get on any wait lists of your choice. And then PSH services and supports. Currently, Mercy Care says 7 contracted providers, but we actually have 8 contracted providers in our community. And then again, the referrals for that process that go directly to that provider. So typically you have a case manager or a housing point of contact at your clinic that should be able to assist in identifying which one of the 8 providers that you're actually interested in participating with and working with. So there's plenty of options there. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pass it on to Laura Pointowski.
Thanks, Matt. All right, so the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of define out peer and family support services. So peer support services are delivered by individuals with common life experiences with the people that they're serving. In addition to helping members to complete their goals, they also are there to provide compassionate listening, as well as to instill hope in our members. And one thing that I know we've talked about a little bit earlier in the other services, but an independent reviewer comes in each year called Witchy, and they're within that report, they actually considered Arizona to be viewed as a national best practice due to the prevalence of peer support services, as well as the variety of settings where you can find peer support. So peer support services can be found in hospital settings, in clinic settings, as well as community settings. And there's also some specific peer support that's related to individuals that may be experiencing any justice issues or any substance use issues as well. So that is peer support in a nutshell. So showing you the evidence, research shows that peer support is effective in engaging people in mental health and addiction services. They also show that peer support is highly effective in helping individuals to play an active role in the treatment that they're receiving. There also have been seen to be reductions in crisis services, as well as utilization of the emergency room as well. And the biggest evidence that I would like to show is the overall satisfaction of members. So members are more satisfied in the services that they're getting when they are engaged in peer support services. So family support services, similar to peer support services, but meant to engage with either the family or the natural supports. So one thing I do want to note with family support services is that in order to receive family support services, you don't need to be the family member. You can be somebody that supports an individual in their everyday life. You don't have to be related by blood. It's the family of choice. The family support services are really designed to help to avoid crises with members. So they help families to understand support groups in the community, community-based resources, as well as services, and just helping with like the general planning of kind of what you do in these situations. These can be both informal and formal. So informal could be, having a bad day and really wanting to kind of go into the specifics of what specifically happened. And formal could be, more of that, getting that plan established for, what's going to happen if your family member is experiencing a crisis. Where do you go if you need additional support? Identifying, support groups in the community, or kind of just like what services your family member may not have tried that could be something that could benefit. And the research for family support has shown that it's effective in increasing confidence and competence in family members. Also creating a community. So not only a lot of times when you see mental health, you think of isolation and really feeling alone. And creating that network and that community is extremely helpful because it helps with enhancing health outcomes and also making sure that, if the family is involved earlier, the family is truly there with the family member throughout the highs and lows of mental illness. And being that the family is there, if they have the skills and the tools that they need to help their family members, you're going to see a reduction in kind of the more challenging issues that you may experience. All right. So I think it's really important when we talk about peer and family support to really talk about how it got started. We've really come so far as a community and as a nation in really addressing mental health and seeing it as equal to physical health, but we still have very far to go. But I want to take us back to about the 1960s, 1970s when the disability rights movement really started. And you see this picture, it says nothing about us without us. Really, the peer and family movement helped to establish voice for individuals that were receiving services, as well as choice in the types of services and support that were needed. So rather than having, other people at a table kind of making decisions for the care that individuals experiencing mental health challenges may have, really the pioneers of the disability rights movement said, I have this lived experience, and I really think that the input that I have can help to guide the services. And this is what works for me, but this is not what's going to work for everybody. And members need to have a choice to understand that, we're not one person. There's a variety of different individuals that are here. And we really need that collective voice to really determine the decisions that's being made. Another thing about the disability rights movement, we saw the formation of peer and family-run organizations. So really that originally started just as kind of networks of support. And as time went on over the past, 50 years, values and community needs were established. So they understood, similar to what Lydia was talking, in different communities all across the nation, these things were popping up, and they're seeing, okay, this is what works. And this is something that we really need to make sure that in the model of peer and family run organizations, this continues. And to this day now, we have peer and family run organizations in our communities. So the evidence-based practice for peer and family run organizations are called consumer operated service organizations. And they've been shown to have a higher effectiveness in helping individuals achieve recovery and also promoting that sense of belonging and community. So some of these values that really stuck from the past 50 years is that belief in peer-based support and that belief in lived experience and valuable input to share, partnering with professionals in the community, but making sure that the membership of the peer and family runs is voluntary, that they're addressing social equity and social equality, and that the services that are delivered are flexible and informal. So you have a choice of, I want to go here, but I don't want to go here. And it's not a mandatory requirement that you go to every single group that the organization offers. Really, those services are based on empowering individuals, helping individuals to feel independent and able to advocate for themselves, establishing responsibility. The peer and family runs are really governed by the membership. Also that big piece with choice, and then respect and dignity and social action as well. So this next slide actually talks about the peer and family run organizations that we have within our network. So for peer run organizations, we have Cheers, Hope Incorporated, NASCARE, REN or Recovery Empowerment Network, STAR or Stand Together and Recover, and Hope Lives. And for family run organizations, we have the Family Involvement Center, My Kid, Raising Special Kids, and Reach Family Services. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our next presenter, who we talked a little bit in this presentation about the services, but Andy's going to talk to you a little bit about what to do and how you can advocate with your clinic to get what your desired result and outcome. So Andy Arnowitz is the Information and Resources Coordinator at Copa Health. He's been in this role for 20 years. And as a free service, he provides information and resources to anyone in or connected to the mental health community. And that means anyone. That means individuals living with a mental illness, their family members, friends, and professionals. No matter what you need, he's committed to helping you solve your problems and pointing you in the right direction. And also, Andy is a peer who, as a volunteer, coordinates several mental health peer support groups in the Valley. So I will turn it over to Andy.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Andy Arnowitz, and I wrote a paper which is titled Advocacy Guidelines for Working with an SMI Clinic or Others, How to Achieve the Desired Result. Next slide, please. Thank you. Today, I'll be sharing highlights of the paper. However, before getting to the advocacy guidelines, I want to quickly mention the chain of command at an SMI clinic. This will be important to know when you're advocating. The chain of command at the clinic starts with the case manager, then it moves up to the clinical coordinator, who is the case manager's direct supervisor. Above them is the clinical director. At the top of the chain of command is the site director or site administrator. If an issue is still not resolved, if you get to the top of the chain of command, feel free to contact me. Now on to the advocacy guidelines. First, I just mentioned contacting me if you get to the top of the chain of command, but feel free to contact me anytime for suggestions, guidance, advice, brainstorming, or any other support. Next, this paper was written at the request of staff who work with individuals designated SMI, in other words, members. However, the guidelines are basically interchangeable for anyone advocating at an SMI clinic. This includes members, families, staff, and any other advocates. Something that can be very important is to have a notebook to document interactions with the clinic. I'll come back to this in a few minutes. In the context of this paper, advocating at an SMI clinic means communicating in a way to get the member the service they are requesting and are eligible for. Getting the service is the goal. You want to come across in the best way possible so that the goal is achieved. A key question is, what words or tone will be most effective to achieve the result? The first interest is to empower the member to advocate for themselves so they can achieve their desired result. If it doesn't currently seem possible for the member to effectively advocate for themselves, you, their advocate, can take a more active role in communicating with the clinic. Even if you believe they aren't currently able to advocate for themselves very much, or seemingly not at all, any small action on their part can be huge and a tremendous start for them. Also, even if you're advocating for the member, you can act as a role model to them. One way to empower the member is by sharing suggestions on how they can be an effective advocate. And you can have them write down those ideas. It may be that you need to assist them in writing those instructions, or even write them yourself, but for them. However, if after providing them with instructions, you feel that they will not be able to communicate in a way to get the desired result, you may need to be the lead person communicating with the case manager, but do so with the member present. This may be in person, or you could even have the member on the phone with you as a three-way call, a conference call. Even with you taking the lead, this is still an opportunity to empower them. They can learn by listening to how you communicate with the case manager. Again, you'll be acting as a role model. And if they are not writing down the advocacy suggestions or not doing much of any other advocating for themselves at the moment, this does not mean that your efforts to empower them are a waste of time. You can be planting a seed about how to advocate, which they may very well utilize in the future. And planting seeds can be very important. As you'll recall me saying, a seemingly extremely tiny step for the member might be a very huge accomplishment. Sometimes a very small incremental change can be a great victory. Any progress or moving in a positive direction is good. The next topic is communicating and working with the clinic. You regularly start with the case manager. Since most things get initiated with the case manager, it's advantageous to have a good relationship with them. However, it's also true that if it's a bad relationship, the member can request having a different one. They can even request a different clinic. However, before requesting a new case manager or a new clinic, it may be valuable to explore resolving the conflict. The next topic is, when should you follow up with the case manager? When a message is left for the case manager, allow them 48 hours to respond. If they do not respond in that time frame, call them back. In other words, if they didn't respond in 2 days, you can call them back on the third day. If needed, next is moving up the chain of command. So, if the case manager did call back and is still not available on that third day, leave them another message. However, after leaving that message, you can then immediately move up the chain of command to their direct supervisor, who is the clinical coordinator, But move up the chain of command one step at a time. In other words, do not go from the case manager to the top, which is the site director or site administrator. Next, when you move up the chain of command and reach out to the case manager's supervisor, if you don't get them and have to leave a message, give them 48 hours to respond, just as you did with the case manager. This same process continues as you move up the chain of command. You should always document and write down who was called, the date and time, the conversation that took place, and any requests or promises that were made. If possible, the member should do this. Doing this is often very beneficial to getting the member what they want if the people at the clinic are not doing what they should be doing. The information that is written down can be shared with supervisors as you move up the chain of command. The member will sound very factual when they state what was said and the date and time of the conversation. If you have it documented, share actual quotes that the case manager said. Case quotes are great. When moving up the chain of command, in about 30 seconds to a minute, tell the supervisor what had been requested and when the request was made, who you previously contacted, and when you did that. That is all you need to do when you start sharing. Supervisors do not necessarily need or want to hear the whole story, but they can ask questions if they feel more information is needed. If they do, you can then elaborate. Next, there can be time-sensitive emergency exceptions. An example of a time-sensitive emergency is that the member will be out of medication in 2 days, or is already out of their medication. It doesn't have any refills left. The case manager should be called immediately to set up a medication appointment within that 2-day time frame if they only have 2 days left of medication. Even if they don't get hold of the case manager, even if you don't get hold of the case manager, still leave a message stating when the member will be completely out of their medication, that they don't have any refills, and need a medication appointment promptly so they don't run out. However, since this is an extremely time-sensitive issue, right after leaving the message with the case manager, call their direct supervisor. If you get to the top of the chain of command and the issue is not being resolved, feel free to call me. The situation needs to be resolved. As I mentioned earlier, it is very important for the member to have a notebook to be an effective advocate for themselves. Even if they do not use it right now, it can still be very wise for them to get one with the hope they will use it in the future. This notebook should be used to write down and document interactions with the clinic. Support the member to always write down the date and time they communicated with their case manager or anyone else, what was requested, and when the case manager said the requested service will happen, or when the case manager said they will call back. Or you can do this for the member if that is needed. Even if the member left a message on the case manager's voicemail, they should still write down what they said in the voicemail message. Any notes you have of what gets said with the case manager will be very useful at a later time if the member needs to move up the chain of command. A case manager's own words can be used to the member's benefit as they move up the chain of command and share what the case manager said with the supervisor. If the case manager says something inappropriate, or promises something that is not acceptable, or won't promise anything, all of that should be written down. As I previously mentioned, if specific quotes of what the case manager says are written down, that's best. You do not necessarily need to show any annoyance if a conversation is not going well. Stay professional and document what they say. When you later state what they said to their supervisor and on what date and time they said it, it will make you sound very factual. Again, quotes are terrific. This makes it hard for a supervisor to dispute what the member is saying. Avoiding what the member says was said versus what the case manager says was said is very wise. Once again, having you using a notebook for the purpose of documenting interactions with the clinic is extremely important to be an effective advocate. The next topic is, how should you start a conversation when moving up the chain of command? You should start the conversation with the case manager's supervisor by letting them know you've already tried contacting the case manager and on what date and time you reached out to them. Also, let the supervisor know what has not been done. Supervisors very likely do not need to know the full story. Regularly, they just want the problem or the issue resolved. At the beginning of the conversation, share all that I just mentioned, including the desired outcome. You should be able to do all that in approximately 30 seconds to a minute. Being short is good. Again, if the supervisor needs or wants to know more, they may ask questions. If they ask a question, you will then have the opportunity to elaborate, but that will be at the supervisor's request. Okay, start conversations with an elevator speech. This is what I was just referring to. And this is very important to be an effective advocate. An elevator speech is saying what you want to say within the time it would take to share an elevator ride. Almost every conversation should start with an elevator speech. In other words, share the bottom line of what you need to say in about 30 seconds to a minute. You should figure out ahead of time what is needed or being requested. Edit down what you want to say just that. The first interest is to support the member in doing this themselves. Having the member write down their elevator speech before reaching out to the clinic is often a very good thing to do. Next, they can practice it. They can practice it on their own or with you. You can also support them by making suggestions on how to edit it down. If it doesn't seem possible for the member to do that effectively at the moment, you should do the elevator speech. But with the member listening to what you say, you'll be acting as a role model to them. After sharing the elevator speech with the case manager, they may ask questions. Once again, if they do ask a question, you will then have the opportunity to elaborate on what you mentioned in the elevator speech, and you'll be doing so at their request. If you have more than one issue to discuss, start with the most important. The next topic is being professional and keeping your cool. This is very important to be an effective advocate. It may sound obvious, it may sound simple. However, in the face of dealing with somebody who is disrespectful or not doing as they said they would, or even angry with you, staying professional and keeping your cool can be extremely hard to do. If you're dealing with someone that upsets you for any reason, even if you're totally justified in being angry, will you be able to keep your cool and stay professional? Almost always, voicing your anger or losing control is not productive. Be professional. It is human and understandable to be angry at times, but that does not mean you need to voice it. The question now is, what's more important, to get the desired service or voice your upset? I would suggest that getting the desired service is what's most important. In the face of adversity, keep your focus on the big picture, which is getting the desired service. You can think and feel whatever comes up for you, but it may be very wise to keep it in your head. You can't necessarily control your thoughts or feelings, but that doesn't mean that you need to air them. Once again, the question is, what's more important, voicing your anger or getting the service that is wanted or needed? It would be most unfortunate if letting out anger got in the way of getting the desired result. Showing anger can backfire. It can slow down or even stop the process of getting what is wanted. Stay respectful and professional, even in the face of someone that is upsetting you or being unprofessional toward you. Very similarly, The key question now is, will your tone and words help get the desired result? You do not want to say or do anything that'll slow down or stop the process of getting what is being requested. If you do act unprofessionally, it can happen to the case manager will use your angry words and your angry tone against you and slow down the process of getting the desired result, or that they don't get you the requested service at all. It is not professional, but it can and sometimes does happen. So you want to come across in the best way to achieve the desired result. That is what I am suggesting is most important. Again, keep your focus on the big picture, which is getting the desired service. The complete paper that I'm speaking highlights from is available online. You can read, download, or print it from there. Now, it may be supportive to refer to the document from time to time, so please feel free to do so. Lastly, my contact information is here on the slide, but it's also in the paper. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.
Thank you so much, Andy.
You're
Now we
welcome.
want to open it up for Q&A for anyone to ask Andy questions or any of the other presenters.
Hello, good morning. I sent some direct messages to Jose and Laura for the information from their presentation. So yeah, I just wanted to get some of the programs for the family support, and then I wanted to get some information on the supportive employment. I work as a rehab specialist at Resilient Health, and I always welcome more resources for our participants. So anything would help from any of you, honestly. Thank you.
Yep, and I posted, I gave you a link to some of the family support groups in the community. I sent it privately back to you, so it should be in your chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Cami, this is Andy Wambach over at Mercy Care. Just keeping an eye on the chat. Circling back to something that Tiffany had asked. Is there an age requirement referring to housing, meaning are these services eligible for individuals 18 to 100 years of age?
Yeah, so, hey, Andy, thanks. Yeah, so the requirement would be that they be 18 or older. That would be the only age requirement. And individuals can be either titled or non-titled for those services as well.
Do we have any specific housing for individuals over the age of 65?
Within Mercy Care, there's not necessarily specific housing set aside, or within the HP, there's not. However, there are a number of different housing programs throughout the community that actually prioritize individuals who are seniors, and that's set aside specifically for that population. That kind of gets into some of the broader community resources, but definitely it exists.
Thank you.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge we're expanding some of those options in our community right now. As we know, there's what's probably been called as the, I'm going to say it, we're all going to hear it, silver tsunami is what they're calling it. So there's been an increase in homelessness in our senior population. So they've been really focusing on adding senior housing also as well.
Matt, while I have you, we'll keep it with you.
Sure.
So had a question on how is training provided to housing specialists at the clinic level?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different opportunities, I think, with regards to training. So we do have, I think, 3 or 4 different trainings that are actually available on Relias that are available at any point in time. And I think in addition to that, Andy facilitates the quarterly meeting with the housing point of contacts. And then as well, we have a quarterly housing collaborative. And that very commonly is bringing in different community partners to kind of outline services that are available in the community, kind of expanding the overall housing knowledge outside of not only what our behavioral health system offers, but also what's available in the broader community.
It looks like we have a lot of activity in the chat, though, around your comment of the silver tsunami. So that's yeah, it's definitely something that a lot of people are seeing. So thank you so much for that. Any other questions, Andy?
Dorothy, can you clarify what specifically your question is surrounding the VI SPDAT?
This is Dorothy Thompson from Lifewell South Mountain Clinic. I'm a rehabilitation specialist, and my questions are I have several clients here at all the sessions that since we've started the conference, and a lot of the clients don't understand criteria sometimes for different types of housing vouchers or supports. And even though I can surely explain to them about the ADSCABAT, does anyone on the panel want to add to their understanding of the VADSCABAT and how that assessment helps determine available resources regarding housing supports and vouchers? Because sometimes clients might not want the supportive housing in that the different agencies have, and they might need other supports like with Home Inc. And they also require the VADSCABAT as well as La Frontera program, their home program that does both job navigation and housing navigation. They require that as well.
Right. So that's a really big question, Dorothy. So I'm going to do my best to answer it. I think first and foremost, if an individual is interested in specific services, generally speaking, there's no requirement to do a VI SPDAT. So if a person needs support services in the community, whether they're homeless, they're in housing, they're looking for housing, there's no requirement for a VI SPDAT to be access any of the PSH services that we talked about.
An assessment tool to determine how severe your homelessness or your lack of services.
Right. So yeah, I can start there. So the VI SPDAT stands for Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. It's a big mouthful, which is why they call it the VI SPDAT. I mean, to your point, to what Dorothy, you just said, it's an acuity tool. It helps determine what people's acuity are. It asks questions about their homelessness, about their health, about justice involvement, and a whole series of other questions that just helps determine the acuity and like basically how much their need is in the community, if that makes sense. Now, going back to your question with regards to the La Frontera Home Program, which that program is actually considered one of our temporary housing assistance program, which is basically a combination of both employment and PSH services. So supported employment and PSH services, and they do ask for a VI SPDAT because that typically requires that a person doesn't score higher on the acuity scale, because typically they're looking for individuals who are kind of in that middle ground who may have some skills and are able to, with some assist and supports, be able to eventually maintain independently. Now, the VI SPDAT, as far as accessing other housing in their community, the VI SPDAT is pretty much our common assessment tool that's used across all of Maricopa County, whether it be the AHP or COC funding, or what's called the Continuum of Care, which manages some of the HUD funding, or a number of other programs that exist in our community. So that document or that acuity score will determine whether or not they qualify for some of those other housing opportunities. I hope I answered all of your questions, because I feel like you asked about 3 in your, and I want to make sure, Dorothy, did I get at your?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. If you have further questions, please feel free to follow up with me.
Thank you so much, Matt. It looks like we had a couple other questions in the chat.
Yeah, so I mean, there were a number of questions related to housing and resources. Someone mentioned, isn't there a statewide housing agency? So Matt, did you just want to clarify what the Access Housing Program is, maybe?
Yeah, so the Access Housing Program, or the what's commonly called to as the AHP, is the statewide housing agency that manages all the Medicaid funded housing opportunities. So that would be for Maricopa County, and then Pima, and then also balance of state. That current administrator is ABC/Home Inc. They kind of work in partnership to manage that. So yes, that is correct.
I thought there was another question that was for Andy, asking if he could restate the chain of command at the clinics. think that was
Sure.
from Jeff. And I don't know if maybe you want to type that in the chat too, but if you wanted to go back over that chain of command, because I think it's very beneficial.
The chain of command, first of all, is also in the paper, so it doesn't need to be memorized, but to repeat it anyway, it starts with the case manager and then moves up to the clinical coordinator, and above them is the clinical director, and above that is a site director or site administrator. There are people beyond that, but what I just wrote in the paper was, if it got to that level and the issue was still not being resolved, you can contact me or anybody else that you know that knows beyond that. But for sure, the hope is that it got resolved by that point.
Yes, this is Dorothy again. I did have a comment. A lot of clients over the years, they relied just on their case manager. And I want to say for any clients that are in this session that there's a lot of supports in your clinic, from peer supports, and peer supports, there's all kinds of peer supports, from health and wellness to family support specialists to our benefits staff, you name it. Then you have, on every single clinical team, it's required to have a rehabilitation specialist. And so that rehabilitation specialist helps with not only assessing barriers to meaningful activity, but they also help with referrals to day programs, career supports, personal development, education, you name it. And in addition, what a lot of clients don't realize is those rehab specialists also train the case managers and peer supports on how to better help their clients besides doing groups. So definitely utilize all the different supports in your clinic. If you don't know what those supports are, most clinics will have welcome groups, or they'll have consumer advisory council meetings where you can learn about what's going on in your clinic, and you can also share concerns.
Thank you, Dorothy. That was great information. And those are really great tools and resources as well. So thank you so much. Any other questions? Any other feedback from anybody? Okay, no more questions. So let's move on here. Thank you so much, everybody. And make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're going to put those links in the chat as well if you want to click on those and follow us. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope everyone has a great week, and I look forward to seeing you guys this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.